Okay, we are live now.
Dear yogis and brother and sister who join our Facebook Live from Malaysia, Singapore, and Australia, a warm welcome to tonight's Dharma talk by Patrick Carney, who is currently conducting a virtual retreat with SBS. The topic of tonight's talk is tracking experience. Patrick will start with chanting, followed by Dharma talk. Without further ado, I would like to invite Patrick to start the session. Patrick, please.
Okay, thank you. Vandana Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Tisarana Buddhang Saranang Gacchami Dhammang Saranang Gacchami Sanghang Saranang Gacchami Tutiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami Tutiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami Tutiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami Tatiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami Tatiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami Tatiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. Panchasila Anatipata Veramani Sikaparang Samadhiyami Adinadana Veramani Sikaparang Samadhiyami Amesu Michachara Veramani Sikaparang Samadhiyami Musavada Veramani Sikaparang Samadhiyami Sura Meraya Majapamadatana Veramani Sikaparang Samadhiyami. So tonight we're going to speak about tracking experience. And last night we talked about the way to Nibbana. And what we were doing was looking at the opening section, the Udesa of the Satipatthana Sutta. So this is the root text for the practice that we're doing. So it occupies a very important place. In any Buddhist tradition, if you have a particular way of doing meditation practice, in some way or another, it will be traced back to the Buddha. And practice this means it'll be traced back to some discourse, sutra in Sanskrit, sutta in Pali. So in the Theravada tradition, there are two main discourses about meditation. You have Satipatthana Sutta, which we're talking about, and the other one is Anapanasati Sutta, discourse on mindfulness of in and out breathing. These are the two main discourses about meditation that we find in the Theravada tradition. And this particular approach is based on the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on the applications of mindfulness. So yesterday we looked at the sentence, "Here a practitioner surrendering longing and sorrow for the world." The sentence, "This way, the four applications of mindfulness is a one-way street for purifying beings, transcending sorrow and distress, vanishing pain and grief, attaining the right path, and realizing Nibbana." So we talked about the way to Nibbana, what Nibbana is, what the connection is with the practice. Now we move on to the next part of the Uddesa, where the Buddha asks the question, what are the four? So what are the four Satipatthanas? And then you have a single sentence repeated 4 times, once for each of the 4 Satipatthanas. This tendency to repeat is very common in the suttas. It makes the suttas quite boring to read because there's so much repetition. But of course, the point is that the Buddha never designed these to be read. These are chants. They're meant to be sung in choir, like we do the chanting in the evening. And of course, when we sing, repetition is quite normal. That's part of the rhythm. And also in an oral tradition, which this is, in other words, something chanted, something where information goes out through the mouth and is received through the ears. In our culture, it tends to be, we receive it through the eyes. But in the Buddha's time, information was received through the ears. Repetition is important because all of this is meant to be memorized and then chanted in choir. Now, when we memorize something, let's say if you had a favorite song when you were young, maybe you're still young. I understand there are still young people around. So you have the classical 3-verse pop song where you have the verses 1, 2, and 3 giving a story, a linear story over time. So boy meets girl, boy and girl fall in love, boy and girl are tragically parted. And then between each verse, maybe once at the beginning and once at the end, you have the chorus. And the chorus is always exactly the same. And if you're meditating 30 years later, and suddenly this song pops up in your mind, what's the bit that's most likely to pop up? It's the chorus, because it's buried deepest into your brain cells. And then as you meditate, you're trying to reconstruct the song. Now, what's the verses? Where do they fit in? But what comes first is the chorus, because that's the central message of the song. And you get the same thing in the Buddha's teaching. When you see repetition like this, you know you're looking at something important. It's being repeated because it's meant to be memorized and really laid down in the brain cells. So let's look at this repeated sentence. And basically what the Buddha is doing here, he's giving us the Satipatthana practice, as it were, in a nutshell. And again, he makes a move which for him is very typical. He's not so much defining Satipatthana, mindfulness meditation, he's describing someone doing it. He does this sort of thing quite often. And we get a sense of what the project is through this description of someone actually doing it. So we'll just go through the first sentence, because all the others are the same, except each one refers to a different Satipatthana. So the 4 Satipatthanas: body, feeling, heart, mind, and Dharma. And we'll talk about these later on. And the first sentence goes, "Here a practitioner surrendering longing and sorrow for the world, lives tracking body as body, ardent, clearly understanding and mindful. So let's unpack this sentence. Now, the core of it, the key, is this idea of tracking. In Pali, this is anupassana, and the verb is anupassati. Now, this is a compound word. You have passana, seeing, and the prefix anu, which denotes, here it denotes along. So seeing along. Now, and this is the same passana that you get in vipassana, insight. Now, if you think about seeing, if you see something, first of all, it implies a direct relationship. Like you have to be looking at something and then you can see it. So seeing implies this direct relationship, and also seeing occurs only in the present. It occurs now. I cannot see what happened 5 seconds ago. I cannot see what will happen 5 seconds from now. I can only see what's happening now. So the seeing indicates a direct engagement with the experience now. And of course, we've been talking about this in terms of noting or bare attention. So you have the passana, you see it now, you add the anu, seeing along. And this implies seeing something now and then tracking it over a period of time. So staying with something over a period of time, extending the seeing through time. This is anupassana. And this is the central aspect of this practice. So we look at this idea of tracking. Now, you get different translations for this. Bhikkhu Bodhi translates it as contemplating. I don't like that translation because contemplating it implies thinking, but this is not thinking. It's more like a direct following something. So I prefer to translate it as tracking. Now, when we track something, the thing about tracking, of course, is that when we track something, we don't care where it goes. So where it goes is not important. What we care about is that we know where it goes. We stay with it over a period of time. So the image that I like to give is, imagine leaping into a taxi and ordering the driver to follow that car. Now you've all seen the movie where this happens. And if you think about your taxi cab driver, and he's seen all these movies too, where this happens. And it's always been his ambition as a taxi cab driver to have someone leap into his cab and say, follow that car. And finally it's happened. So he's very happy. So he pulls out into the traffic and he follows that car. You're sitting in the front passenger seat. Now, this taxi cab driver is very experienced and he really knows the city. And he's a skillful driver. So he's weaving in and out of the lanes and he's just keeping the right distance behind the car that you're following. And you begin to settle back and think things are going well. This is good. We've got no problem here. And you might even be thinking about how big a tip you should give your driver because he's obviously pretty good. Until your driver comes to a T crossing. And at the T crossing, the car that you're following turns to the left and your taxi cab driver, without the slightest hesitation, turns right. Now, after you recover from your initial shock, would you feel pleased with your taxi cab driver? Would you still be thinking of how much you're going to give him as a tip? Or would you be feeling irritated and even upset with him Now, you might demand, what the hell are you doing? I just asked you to follow the car. The car turned to the left, you turned to the right. What are you on about? Now, the taxi cab driver is quite surprised by your response because he's got a very good reason for turning to the right. And there could be a number of reasons. Let's say your taxi cab driver is an old hippie. So he might answer, but man, it just felt good to turn right. It's like the universe was calling me. Would you be happy with that answer? Maybe not. Maybe your taxi cab driver is a man of habit. And he responds, but I expected the car to turn right here. Everybody turns right here. I've been driving these streets for 20 years. I can assure you, everybody turns right at this corner. It might be understandable, but you wouldn't be happy with him. But let's say your taxi cab driver was just trying to be helpful. He says, but it's so much more interesting to the right and so boring to the left. Why would you want to go there? This is much better. Again, you probably would not be particularly impressed. It could be that your taxi cab driver, unknown to you, is strongly political. And he replies with a glint in his eye, mate, I am so right wing, I never make a left turn. Now, any number of excuses could be conjured up. But no matter the excuse, you would feel that your taxi cab driver had failed a basic test and you would not be happy with him at all. But of course, as meditators, we do what that taxi cab driver does again and again and again and again. And we do it every time we judge our experience as being in some way wrong, quote unquote, and expect that something else should be happening instead. And of course, this is very common. Everybody does this. Everybody who complains, maybe just internally, maybe to others, that this has been a really bad day of my meditation because what I wanted to happen didn't happen. What I expected to happen didn't happen. What I was told would happen did not happen. Any of those kinds of responses, they're exactly the same as the taxi cab driver. When we're tracking experience, it doesn't matter what the experience is. What matters is that we know what it is. So we don't care where the object of awareness goes or what happens to it. We care only that we follow it wherever it goes and we understand whatever happens to it. So there's a degree of unpredictability that's built into the practice. And this, in turn, requires a flexibility in the attitude of the practitioner, a willingness, essentially a willingness to be surprised, a willingness to see things turn out completely differently from what was expected or desired. And this is regardless of what particular technique we might be engaged in. So we've talked about that there's a wide variety of possibilities, even within this one lineage of Mahasi Sayadaw. So if you follow U Pandita's approach, it involves focusing on a specific object or a limited number of objects. So in the case of Sayadaw U Pandita, it'd be really emphasizing the rising and falling of the abdomen. Stay with it, stay with it, stay with it, stay with it. So very tight, controlled, focused. Or at the opposite end of the spectrum, you might have someone like Sayadaw U Tejaniya having a form of open awareness where it doesn't matter what the mind is aware of. What we're interested in is the mind that is doing the awareing, or anything in between. But regardless of the specifics of the technique, the same basic principle. We go wherever it takes us. That's the key point with mindfulness meditation. So here a practitioner, surrendering longing and sorrow for the world, lives tracking body as body. Now, why the as body? Why body as body? So to track body is one thing, because this is the first Satipatthana. And we've been talking about the role of the body in meditation practice. It plays a really central role. But why body as body? Now, again, this is translated differently by different translators. Thich Nhat Hanh translates it as the body in the body. So you get variations in the translations, but what they're all referring to, or what they're all conveying, is a sense of intimacy with the experience. So it's what we've talked about as bare attention. To track body as body, what does that mean? Remember when we were playing with the elements, and we were talking about how the way that we experience the body is through a network of concepts normally. So we're constantly, for example, making judgments about the body, especially this body, my body. So we see our body through this network of concepts. So is the body good enough? Is it presentable? Is it acceptable? Will it do? Should I feel embarrassed when people see this body and how it does what it does? And of course, we see other bodies through networks of concept. So for example, in advertising, we're constantly being bombarded by images of what a body should look like. And then people can get tied up in knots trying to shape that body into that image. And there's whole industries built around this process. So if we have a relationship to body like that, this is not body as body. This is body as my fantasy, which maybe if I work hard enough and get the iron hard abs and go to the gym every day for 5 years, that I might one day develop and others might admire. Body as body is the simplicity and the intimacy of the direct experience. So that's what we were getting at with the elements. So an experience of hardness is just hardness. An experience of softness is just softness. It's being intimate with the sensation and not adding anything extra to it. And this relationship we talked about yesterday in terms of the cooling down. So it's like we're stripping away everything in excess, everything that doesn't belong to just this. So practicing intimacy. And this is the idea of tracking body as body, tracking mind as mind. And it's another way that the Buddha conveys this sense of intimacy with the experience and not adding anything extra to it. And of course, every time we get lost in concept about the body, we're adding something extra to it. So here a practitioner surrendering longing and sorrow for the world, lives tracking body as body. Now, let's look at this word lives. The Pali is viharati, and it means simply to live, to dwell. You might be familiar with the word vihara, often used for monastery. A vihara is a place where people live, specifically monks or nuns. Now, when we talk about living, tracking body as body, what is the Buddha getting at here? What's he trying to say? Well, if you think about your relationship to meditation practice, let's say that you're quite a keen meditator. Let's say that you've got the right equipment, you've got a good quality cushion and a good quality pad, as we were talking about in the posture and flexibility. And let's say you set it up, you've got a nice altar. This is your sacred spot. This is where you do your practice. Let's say you're very dedicated. You never let a day go by without minimum 2 hours on that cushion, minimum. And let's say on weekends you triple that because you're very, very keen. And let's say you all your holidays you go off on retreat and do maximum meditation. Does anybody do that? I have to confess that I don't, but anyway, maybe there's someone out there. Now, let's say you do all that. Still, you're not living on that cushion. You're visiting the cushion. Now, maybe you are a regular visitor. Maybe you are a quite dedicated regular visitor. Maybe you are a frequent visitor, but you're a visitor. You don't actually live there. But the Buddha is saying with this practice of tracking body as body, mind as mind, we are meant to live there. In other words, it's meant to become our default position. Now, we talked about the nature of distraction at the beginning of the retreat. Why is it so hard to keep my mind on my meditation object over a period of time? I try to do it, but again and again and again, my awareness is catapulted into something else, like thinking, for example. And it's very frustrating. I keep dragging it back onto the meditation object, and then it goes, oh, drag it back. Maybe get a heavy brick, put it on top. Now stay there, stay there, stay there. Oh, off it goes again. So a huge struggle going on. Why is it so hard? And one of the reasons is because it's our habit to let the mind swoop off and get lost in the world of story. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. And we've been building that habit for decades. If you think about when did it begin, at some point in each of us, I suspect each of us, at some point in our childhood, discovered imagination. We discovered that we could be anywhere but here if we wanted to be. Have you got any memories from childhood of sitting in the classroom and kind of eyes drifting out the window and the mind going, "Fool," and a boring class suddenly evaporates and it's over in a few minutes and you had a good time because you were in this fantasy world? So at some point we discover that we can actually escape whatever it is that we're doing, whatever it is that's happening. We can create an alternative world and live in it. And of course, when we were young, we were quite good at that. As we get older, we're not so good at it, but we've got the habit. And so as soon as the ordinary physical world isn't really grabbing our attention, then bang, off we go. this is our default mechanism, as it were. Now, what the Buddha is saying is we need to change that default mechanism. We need to make our default mechanism awareness of what is happening now. And that is a big job. That's a very big job. The first time I heard about it in these terms was in 1984, the first time I went to Burma. And in those days, you could only get 1 week visa. There were no meditation visas, just tourist visas, and they were for 1 week. And I spent my week at Mahasi Center. And the teacher who was teaching the foreign meditators at that time was Sayadaw U Pandita. And he had 1 hour a day in which to teach the foreigners. And there was one foreigner, and that was me. So I had a week with him, one-on-one, learning the basics of this practice. It was a very good introduction. And at one point, he said to me, he said, your job as a meditator is simply to do this. From the moment you wake up in the morning until the moment you fall asleep at night, you must note whatever arises in your experience through any of the 6 sense doors, right down to the blinking of an eye. And do that continuously all day. That's your job. And although I'd only been in Burma for a few days, I had learned the correct response to this kind of demand, which of course was, yes, Sayadaw. But what I was thinking was, that is impossible. There is no way I could do that. But still, I gave it a go. I gave it my best shot. And after some time, I concluded I was right. It is impossible. It can't be done. But then I realized that what I can do, what can be done, is to be aware now. It's impossible, as far as I'm concerned, to be mindful all through the day, even one day. But it is possible, it's always possible, to be mindful now. And I think that's the key to living, tracking body as a body. It's our relationship to time. It's not that we have to do this for a week. It's not that we have to do it for a day. What we have to do is do it now. And this relationship to time is really central. We'll probably talk more about it as we go through. But I think this is the key to getting a sense of what the Buddha is talking about when he says, live in this. Because our life occurs now. It doesn't occur any other time. It occurs now. So we're cultivating a habit of now, pay attention. Now, have the lights on rather than off. Now, be face to face with the experience. And the aim is that this does become our new default mechanism, our default position. So this practice is more than a meditation technique. Meditation technique plays an important role. We quite literally train the mind through the training of attention. And we learn different techniques in order to do things like, how do I stabilize the mind? How do I aim the mind to where I want it to go? And all these mental gymnastics are all very important. But we learn these so that we can be present to what is happening now as our normal, ordinary, everyday way of living. That's living tracking body as body, mind as mind. So here, a practitioner surrendering longing and sorrow for the world, lives tracking body as body, mind as mind, etc. So surrendering longing and sorrow for the world. So what's this about? If we look at the Pali, what gets translated as longing and sorrow, and you get different translations in English. What's the first one? I think the first one is abijja. Gets translated as longing. Sometimes it's desire. And abijja is literally a leaning out or leaning toward. And what it refers to is a loss of balance of the heart. If you're doing the posture and flexibility in the morning, so each morning we start with the standing posture. And we carefully construct the standing posture. Got the contact with the feet on the floor, find the balance, lift up through the center of the body, around the center, drop down, and maintain the balance. So then we do a movement of some sort. And then I would say, now come back into the center or check your balance. Because you notice you're standing, you do something, and we've lost the balance. Often we're leaning forward. Or I've got to do something. We lean forward to do it. Abijja is this leaning forward, but it's the leaning forward of the heart. So it's like we get entangled in things and we lose our balance and we get caught up. And in that state, we lose mindfulness. So abijja, this longing, implies a falling toward, and sorrow translates domanassa, which means basically any pain of the mind, so any non-physical pain. And again, it's like this loss of emotional balance. We get tangled up in things and distressed and agitated and upset and so on. And in that state, it's difficult to be mindful. We tend to get lost in our concepts about the world and lost in our reactions and reactivity. So surrendering longing and sorrow for the world. So, okay, letting that go and coming back to balance. And then we lose the balance. Okay, let it go. Come back to the balance. And then we lose it again. Okay, let it go. And come back to balance. So this is surrendering longing and sorrow for the world. So it's again and again, it's dropping the entanglement, dropping the agitation, dropping the way that we fall into difficulty. Just let it go, try again, let it go, start again, let it go, start again, let it go, start again. And this is an important part of the whole process. So the practitioner, surrendering longing and sorrow for the world, lives tracking body as body, ardent, clearly understanding, and mindful. Now here the Buddha gives 3 qualities that the practitioner needs if they are to be successful in this project. So let's have a look at these 3 qualities. First is ardency. From a word that literally means heat. And it refers to the passion, the commitment, the determination, the effort required to do this practice. So as we've already experienced, this practice is not easy. Sometimes people think of meditation in terms of relaxation. Sometimes people turn up at meditation retreats thinking, I need to relax. by the end of the first day, they realize they've made a horrible mistake. Many years ago, I was a resident teacher at the Blue Mountains Insight Meditation Center. And we used to get people ringing up asking if they could come and meditate. And usually they had no idea what was involved. Like there was one young man who said, look, me and my girlfriend, we really want to come up and we need to chill out. We need to meditate. I said, oh yeah, you want to come here and meditate? Well, we haven't got any retreats on at the moment, but you can book into one. Oh, no, man, no. We don't want to do a retreat. We just want to come and meditate. And so have you had any experience in meditation before? Oh, yeah, yes, that's not a problem. It's not a problem. Uh-huh. And what do you think you would do in your daily meditation? Oh, chill and, we could sunbake together. That'd be good. That'd be relaxing. No, I think you've come to the wrong place. It's not relaxation. It's really hard work. And you've got to be really motivated to do it. And particularly since you don't get a result quickly. And this is one of the characteristics of meditation practice. I mean, you might have a few interesting experiences that pop up. But if you're meditating in order to change the way that you live, the results come slowly. It's a long-term investment. It's not a short-term investment. So in order to do it to the point where you can actually see a result, you've got to be committed. This is ardency. And this takes us to the whole problem of effort, and in particular, right effort, which we've already been talking about. Because if I'm going to do this over the long term in order to get a result, if the idea is that I'm supposed to live like this, then what is the quality of effort that I need to be making? Because whatever it is, it cannot mean strain, because it's got to be sustainable. So if you, as a meditator, if you ask yourself, how do I know that I'm making right effort? Well, one way of looking at it is, can I keep this going over a long time? If I'm doing something that I can only maintain over a short time, let's say a sitting period of 30 minutes, let's say meditation object is the breathing. Let's say your teacher is a fierce Zen master with a big stick, Japanese stick. And you've got to sit in perfect posture and you've got to track every breath for the next 30 minutes. And if you move, whack. So you'd be inclined to make heroic effort. And you might even get through the 30 minutes. And you might even be able to say, yeah, I grabbed every single inhalation and every single exhalation. But in all probability, you would never come back to meditation again. Enough. You don't want to go back there. That's not sustainable. So you want something that you can keep going all day long, or week long, or month long, or year long. So finding right effort is a major challenge for people in this practice. It's not easy. It takes time to work it out. But I think one of the keys is, again, coming back to time. How do I create have a quality of effort that will get me through a whole week? Well, first thing, forget about the week. Just be mindful now. That really helps to find what right effort actually means. So the practitioner is ardent, clearly understanding. This brings us to what the Buddha calls sampajanya, clear understanding. At least that's how I translate it. One of the old translations from Nyanaponika is clear comprehension. More recently, I've seen clear awareness, which I personally don't like. Sampajanya is the Pali, and it's based on the root nya, to know, to understand. From the same root, you get words like sanya, perception, panya, wisdom or understanding. A clear understanding is the understanding that arises when you get to know something over a period of time. So remember, what we're doing in this practice, we're tracking experience over time, experience of body and of mind. If I follow something over a period of time, if I pay attention to something over a period of time, I get to know it. I get to understand it. I get to see what it does under all sorts of circumstances. So if I track my experience of body and mind over a period of time, I get to know my own body and mind. It's rather like if you live with someone over a period of time, you get to know them. You might get to know them very well, especially if you've got a lot invested in the relationship. So let's say you're living with your spouse or your partner, and you know, if my spouse is miserable, my life is going to be pretty miserable too. So I've got to do what I can to keep her happy. So I have to know her. I have to know, how far I can go before I irritate her so much that life is going to be very difficult. So we get to know someone when we live with them. We get to know ourselves when we live with ourselves, which is what we're doing when we're doing the meditation practice. This is sampajanya. It's kind of ground level wisdom. There's nothing particularly mystical about it, but it is the development of self-knowledge, self-understanding. And of course, that makes life a lot easier if we understand who we're dealing with, this person. And this clear understanding also includes the aspect of the meditation technique. So we've been playing around with different methods and techniques and playing different games. We're going to do more of that. And we're doing this because we want to understand how this practice actually works. What are the basic principles? Imagine if you own a car and you want to know how the engine works. Well, the classic thing is you take the engine apart, you put it back together again, and then you really know how it works. This is what we're doing in this retreat. It's like we're taking the meditation practice apart, then putting it back together again. We want to understand how it works. And then we can learn to do it skillfully. We can develop the craft of meditation. We can become skillful meditators, just as you might become a skillful musician or a skillful cook. Meditation is another craft. And this is the part of the job of clear understanding, sampajanya. So surrendering longing and sorrow for the world, the practitioner lives tracking body as body, mind as mind, ardent, clearly understanding and mindful. So at the center, of course, is mindfulness, which we've already talked about. We're just briefly going back over this. Mindfulness is memory. The Pali word is sati, which literally means memory. It's interesting that when the Buddha talks about the loss of mindfulness, the way he expresses it is with the expression mutta sati. And mutta means forgotten. And it has a quality of bewilderment to it. You can see it in the nature of forgetting. Mindfulness is remembering. So the opposite of mindfulness is forgetting. So have you ever forgotten something? Now, if you think back to a time when you forgot something, in the moment that you forgot, did you know you had forgotten something? And of course, no. Because if you remembered that you've forgotten, you wouldn't have forgotten. You would have remembered. When we forget, we don't know that we've forgotten. That's the nature of forgetting. What does the Buddha call this? He calls it delusion. The loss of mindfulness means the arising of delusion. Now, take, for example, when you are distracted in your meditation practice. Let's assume that you're distracted by thinking. And we've talked about this before. I'm tracking my meditation object, and at some point, the awareness slips away into thinking. And when that happens, I don't know that it has happened. So I'm thinking, but I don't know that I'm thinking. Isn't that weird? Have you ever thought about how weird that is? And then suddenly I know that I'm thinking. Whoops, I'm thinking. And it's like I wake up in the middle of this dream. And the weird thing is, I've been thinking for the past 5 minutes. And I've got no idea what happened. It's the first time I know about it. Now, what happened back then when I was distracted? Suddenly, I forgot. I forgot that I was meditating, or I forgot my meditation object. These are the two flavors of forgetting. But the point is, I forgot. And in the moment that we forget, we don't know that we've forgotten. So we've moved from understanding into complete delusion, like that. 5 minutes later, oh, I'm thinking. Suddenly, I know exactly what's going on. So I've just moved. First of all, I've just remembered. Oh, that's right, I'm thinking. Oh, I'm supposed to be meditating. And that remembering is mindfulness. And you notice that it's a movement from delusion to understanding. Now I know what's going on. And so the pattern of mindfulness practice is forget, remember, forget, remember, forget, remember, forget, remember, forget, remember. And we do this again and again. We forget again and again because it's our habit to forget. We've been cultivating this habit for a long time. And it's going to take a while to adjust it. The important thing is the remembering. So when you come out of distraction, when you suddenly realize, oh, I'm distracted, do not judge yourself as I'm a hopeless meditator. Why does this always happen to me? Instead, congratulate yourself. Why should you congratulate yourself? Because over beginningless lives, you have been practicing mindfulness. And as a result of the mindfulness heritage that you bring with you into this life, that you are now meditating, you forget your mindfulness, but spontaneously you remember. That's the spontaneous arising of mindfulness. Obviously, that's your good karma coming to fruition. So congratulate yourself on the arising of mindfulness and treat that moment as gold. It's extremely valuable because you're seeing the arising of mindfulness. This is a good thing to get to know. So don't waste time judging yourself for having been distracted because you notice that the distraction occurred in the past. It's already over. I am already mindful. All I have to do now is to remember to continue to be mindful now, and then to remember to continue to be mindful now, and then to remember to continue to be mindful now. So really treat these moments of coming out of distraction as valuable because you really see the nature of mindfulness in that moment. And it's a very useful thing. What you might also do is when you realize, oh, I'm being distracted, so now I'm mindful again, is you might want to look back, like what happened just then? How did I lose it? Now, don't think about it, but just kind of look back, and you might see it or you might not. You might recognize, oh, that's how I lost it. Or you might not. If you don't worry about it, just continue. But you might see it. And that is useful to recognize, oh, that's how I lost it. And often, two areas to look would be, what was the object of awareness when I forgot? What was the quality of the awareness when I forgot? So just to give you an example, let's say I'm doing breathing meditation, and 5 minutes later I wake up in the middle of a dream. If someone comes to me in the interview and says, my grounding object is breathing, but I keep getting distracted by thinking. One of the basic questions I would ask is, when the awareness slips away from your breathing, does it slip away on the inhalation or the exhalation? Now that's a real question, and it's an important question. And the answer can actually reveal a lot about the state of the mind as you're tracking the breathing. So you might want to check that out if breathing is your meditation object. But even if it isn't, it's interesting to look back, what happened just then when I lost it? And again, that can teach you something about mindfulness if you see it. If you don't see it, forget it. Just continue. I think that's enough for tonight. Thank you. So that's question time, and I think we've actually got a couple of questions from yesterday.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for the Dharma talk. Sadhu. Dear fellow yogis and all brother and sister who join our Facebook Live tonight, the Dharma talk has ended. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Please do join us again tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. Malaysia time. I will stop the live streaming now. Thank you.